We are.
All right, it's time.
Okay, so you're on. Why aren't you?
We have called to order our work session, and first up we have our engineering director, Charles Eaton, with the right-of-way encroachment program discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I also handed out a red line that is based on our attorney's comments. So in case you had any same comments that they had, maybe I could short circuit that because they already had their comments. Basically what we're presenting tonight is the draft code language that would enforce the program that we presented last time we were here. This is just a draft form. It's basically for you guys to comment on get back with it and let us know so we could bring back the final code amendment for the right to allow encroachments within our right, which we currently do not. The code's pretty simple. It's the same code with a few minor corrections that you guys asked for at the last time from what Taggart and City of Lake Oswego do. So both of those are using the same file code. The tweaks are the change to the major permit, but basically where you guys said that you only want to hear major permits having notifications and revisions and appeal process back to you. The exemptions, because we are going to allow some outright non-conforming use exemptions. One new change that we have not discussed is the addition of this group of projects that happened between September 1st, 2015 and today, or whenever you adopt this. That would be those projects that have violations currently outstanding, which is what started this whole thing. So we have to do something with those violations that are on the books. So that's what that is. That would be in lost it now. So that new language that we've never talked about before.
040C, middle of page 3.
Right.
Encroachment.
And there's a supplemental, there's a accompanying language also in 020A2, which basically gives them a time to get a permit and become in conformance and have the violation waived. So this would be like the gentleman that came in and started this conversation with the landscape wall out inside the right of way. He can come in and get his permit, and then it'll be done. So those are the only two things that we've done differently. I know this is the first time you've seen this code, so that's why we brought it for you. So with that, I'm going to just kind of open it up for some discussion and see what you guys think. Quite honestly, I'm also trying to build in some time for the next item that we added, because I think that'll take a little bit more time too.
The only question I had was about whether or not it might make sense to have an appeal process for the revocation of a permit. And maybe it is also only for significant ones that we would hear appeals for to get the permit in the first place. I imagine if someone gets a permit to build some major thing and spends a lot of money putting it in, and then the city decides that they want to revoke that permit, there should be some process that might mirror the same appeal process that they had to begin with.
So are you thinking compensation?
Nope, just appeal process.
Because we do have a revocation on 090.
Right, I mean, so they have the applicant have the ability to appeal that part.
Okay.
Does anyone have any
I don't
feelings
have
against
any
that?
problem with an appeals process. I won't go on record again as saying that I don't think that city council is the right body for these appeals, personally. I think the engineering director makes a decision. The appeal process is the city manager. Because I don't think that I don't think it's good for city councils to be getting into the facts of encroachments, fence heights, these kind of things. So, but I do agree with an appeal procedure, and I think revoking one, although these were revocable completely, right? At the city's discretion. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the appeal standard would be if the city can, at any moment, revoke.
Well, yeah, because the first line of 090 is it's revocable at any time for the sake of public interest.
The only thing I could see
It say it might be.
The only thing I could see is if somebody got overzealous, and there would be an opportunity to be heard, but I think that opportunity exists no matter what, right? Because they can always come to council or anywhere else, complain that they think that they're being taken advantage of to have their thing revoked. Most of the time, these are only going to happen if we're doing a construction project to build this. Right, that's when we're going to revoke it. If we actually got a construction project identified in a capital improvement plan to go through that area. So Otherwise, I can't envision why we would go down the road looking for opportunities to move the road.
Well, just, I mean, I guess, we've heard about places where, there's a tree in the area where there's a capital improvement project and the community really wants to save the tree, but, well, the specs are saying that this has to go here and that can't. And so maybe just some sort of process that formalizes the ability of the applicant to say, hey, wait a minute, can't we do something else here?
For the revoking?
Yeah.
Well, so that presumes that they got a permit for that tree in the first place. Which if it's a
I was using the tree as an example. That's not a great example.
I'm just trying to wrap my
Or fence.
Maybe it's
head
a play structure, like something.
Hopefully they're not putting a play structure.
Well, no, hold on. There's actually a very good project of reclaiming the streets in Portland that they are allowing encroachments of those types of things. So nature playscapes in streets that are completely unimproved. And it's a great use of space. And so I could see in the future where, the city decides, oh, this is on the map for improvement. And all of a sudden this thing that has become part of the landscape that the community loves is now, there's no process for the applicant to say, hold up, you gave me this permit, the community loves it.
Yeah. To just play devil's advocate for a minute, since when someone, at least here, I don't know about any place else, when they want to do something like that and they apply for a permit, it's stated right then that we'll give you a permit, but realize that, hypothetically, let's say, look on the, the capital improvement projects, it's listed for, street widening 12 years from now. So, you may have to take that out. Or
list.
Just pointing out the fact that in all of these, the city has the right at whatever time to come back and say, I'm sorry, but now we have to do something here, so it's got to go. I mean, they would know that up front.
Well, we wrote in, though, that we would do that for the public good, and I guess I would like to see some.
Good. So what's the weighing of the public good?
Right.
I think that's the issue, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
I will also say that no matter what list or CIP list or anything else that something is on, people will become attached to whatever the improvement is.
I know
so
they will.
any change
And
after the fact
I
would
can
be a
understand that totally.
Absolutely.
Just trying to look at both sides, and see, it's kind of like, well, you knew that going in, but okay, now we've used this for so long. I mean, like I know a circumstance where a street's been dead-ended and it feels like somebody's property, but it's not. And, it's almost the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, but where we've actually formalized the process for getting the permit to establish something like that, I guess I sort of treat that a little bit differently than something that's hasn't been permitted and just, has sort of happened outside of the city's approval process. I guess I would just be curious to know what Portland is doing. Maybe if because they are doing, there is this program now, and I forget what they're calling it, but you can essentially, if a street is unimproved, there's a project that already happened. There's someone who built like these cool, the nature play sort of things. And it's an unimproved street, and I imagine that there's some sort of a process that the city also has in terms of revoking that permit to, if it ever needs to be improved. And I would just like to know if there's any room here for an appeal of taking away the permit.
I don't think it really hurts one way or the other.
Okay.
I keep trying to think about how that's, other than staff time and our time.
Right.
I'm not seeing a downside to that either. Which it is a downside.
Go try on sitting in back.
Yeah.
So, Peter did show up, but I don't think there's any downside to putting it in there because, like I said, they can always take it to council.
Yeah.
So, I don't really think it hurts anything. I can tell you, Portland has a very robust right-of-way encroachment code. Finding it in their municipal code is like tough. Their code is terrible. Just trying to find it. So that's why we settled on these two. They were all in one place. They were a little easier for us to find. But I think adding a appeal process to the revocability portion.
So appealing to who? To Shane's point about, who determines these things, or who determines in the beginning, and who determines if there's an appeal? And is that a city council purview, or is it more so city, staff and city manager or whatever? I mean,
I think that's an interesting point.
yeah, I do too, and
I don't know that all
thought about
appeals should be coming to city council.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent 45 minutes on the junk issue a couple of hearings ago, and I think there's more important business for this council than those kinds of things, personally.
You notice I'm not fighting you on it either, so it's really up to you guys if you like it.
But the actual reality is, so they say we make it the city manager, and they appeal to the city manager, then they come to the city council.
Well, they could come and they could speak on their 3 minutes.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
They
And
could lobby us
typically-
individually to change the rule. That's
And
fine.
2 weeks
And that's
from then,
typically
we'd be
what
back,
everybody is-
saying,
we
here's
would then-
what we found out.
We would bring it to you to talk about the policy, about changing the entire policy and whether or not we're applying it correctly, instead of you hearing
Yeah.
individual applications for individual residents. I think it's probably best practice to have the CM do it, but like I said, if you guys feel like this is really important to you, I'm not going to fight you on it. It's just going to take time on your agenda.
No, I'm good with this city manager,
I'm good with that.
person.
The admiral, we'll call it.
Yeah. We'll come back and let you change all the policies.
So did I have counsel in here?
Yeah, that's the way we talked about it before.
Under 12.14.060, it was decision of the engineering director or designee to the city council.
So I can tell you that at
Well, it
least
says the city council
Tiger does do city
conduct a
manager.
hearing.
So,
manager.
Yeah.
For the appeals or for,
for the appeals.
Tiger does city manager.
who, I thought
thought you said
Tiger
it
was making the city manager or their appointee was making the decision in the first place.
And
Oh, is that what it is?
Because I'm pretty sure, which is a point that I wanted to make on this packet, is that we start out talking about that the city engineer will be making these decisions, but then when you get down into the nitty-gritty in the last 2 pages, it flips back to the city manager, which I don't think was intentional.
For
I think that was-
appeals or?
No, for
Sorry.
signing off on some of the stuff, right?
Yeah, I highlighted it all, so I can go through it.
That has to do with insurances, which I did, whether we impose an insurance requirement on them. So the city manager would make the final decision on whether that has a significant liability to the city, that encroachment needs insurance.
So otherwise, the permit is issued
Well,
by-
so proposed encroachment shall not prevent access to cover, obstruct, or block the flow of water or into catch basins, ditches, or swales, and shall not otherwise alter the natural drainage patterns in a manner that adversely affects other property where drainage is involved. The city manager
Page 4 of 6.
or designee may set specific requirements.
In standards, okay, so we missed one there. We missed a couple things in standards.
Yeah,
We
so-
had encroachment handout instead of public works standards.
So that's there. It's down on conditions, B1.
Yeah, it was meant to be city manager on the out of the ordinary type of items, with city engineer or engineering director to the other items.
Okay,
So we do have some wordsmithing there, so we'll take a look for that.
all right.
Any other?
Yeah, I got a couple quick ones. So WS 12, 2 of 6. Let me get up to 12-14-020, encroachments within public right-of-ways and easements. B2, it talks about the fees. The fee shall be paid at the time of application in the amount determined by resolution of the city council. It makes it sound like the city council, after this thing is determined, will then sit down and have a resolution about how much they're going to pay. I think it would be much more straightforward to just refer to our fee schedule.
Schedule, that makes, easier. Yeah.
Well, and it makes more sense to the average person who's reading this that
Well,
they,
they'll know the right
they'll know where to look
Yeah.
so that they know what they are going to pay.
It would be a departure from what all our ordinances say, but that's the
Well,
only.
then maybe all our ordinances need to be fixed.
All our ordinances
It's
have
not
the same
uncommon
language.
for our code to be really hard to figure out because you end up
Yeah.
popping around to all these different things.
Well, the way you generally modify your fee schedule is through resolution.
Right.
And so I think
Absolutely,
that
but they don't know that.
right.
It's legally correct, there's nothing legally
legally
incorrect, but
correct.
it's not
The inference
clear.
there.
What
It's not reader.
the point I'm making is the people that have to read this, the people have to understand and then follow the rules, that makes it hard for them to understand.
Maybe if you said pursuant to the city's most recent fee schedule, so that there's triggering language in there to know it readjusts if you adopt this in like 2017. That doesn't mean that the fee schedule is 217
Right.
for in perpetuity.
Right.
The fee
To
should
the
be paid in
applicable master fee
at the
schedule.
time
Yeah.
of application in the amount
Set by.
to be found on the fee schedule,
Most current fee schedule.
most current fee schedule.
Well, I think it'd be hard pressed for someone to come in and say, I want to pay from the 2011 fee schedule. When it says
They printed something out when they
passed
first
this in
started.
2017, and even though it's 2050, I get those.
the 2017 deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if we just refer to the fee schedule instead of by resolution of the city council.
Our definition section somewhere in the very beginning of code, it should say master fee schedule is defined as the current fee schedule, and then you never have to.
There you
Yeah,
go.
we will have to add that definition, because we don't have that anywhere.
But anyway,
Application for encroachment permit, shall request comments from so then the next line, C, the engineering director or designee shall review the application for an encroachment permit to determine its compliance with standards and shall request comments from affected city departments. I thought it might be worthwhile and may request comments from affected city departments and utilities, so that they're aware that there's going to be an interface with the utilities, that could be problematic to whatever they're trying to do.
And the utilities is in one of the conditions.
It is further, yeah. But
And you're suggesting change it from shall to may?
shall to make, because he won't necessarily have to be speaking to the utilities if he knows for a fact there aren't any utilities in that place. And may allows him to speak to the directors, and it doesn't force him to speak to them. And I don't know that he would necessarily speak to, say, the finance director.
But they're
about
not
something.
shocked if we don't do something.
Right, exactly. And then,
Primarily, this is our own utilities too, the Public Works Department, just to make sure.
so then I have a little bit of concern, and I'm trying to find it here quickly, but geez Louise,
tweeting there. Are you guys hearing?
that's me.
It's him.
I thought a bird was flying this.
It doesn't sound like something up above
The
the
birds
ceiling
are
tile.
going, I'm out of this smoke, let me in the building. Okay, the birds won't come back. A little heartburn about removing all these definitions of the parts of the right-of-way simply because later on, when we get into minor encroachments and exemptions, there are two items. There's one item that is exactly the same in both minor encroachments and exemptions that is only differentiated by where it is found in the right-of-way. So if we don't give them that definition up front as to what the heck that means, they don't know whether they're exempt or it's a minor encroachment.
So in accordance with what the conversations with Tim earlier today is that we never used those terms in the code. So those definitions will be in the standards to tell people where they're looking for all the different encroachments. But since they aren't used in the code, there shouldn't be a definition in the code.
Because there's nothing referring
There's
back
nothing
to
in the
them.
code that actually
Right.
says.
There's nothing in the code that refers to pedestrian zone, furniture zone.
Frontage zone,
So is there someplace in the code we were?
yes, 12.14.040 exemptions. Number 2, planter boxes in the frontage zone.
4 point.
Okay, and we're discussing taking that out, I see.
Yes,
So
so now
that would need to stay in then, because when we were looking through it today, we did not find that initial reference. So
Well, I guess,
we will keep that in since I referred to it.
so you're
The intent
saying,
is these definitions that we're removing are not referred to ever in this document.
Yeah.
Right, so I got it on like furniture zone and all that, which is all a
Right.
downtown thing anyway, but frontage zone is actually a critical piece of defining whether that's exempted or just a minor.
Well, thank you for that catch.
You're welcome.
so you're
Okay.
saying, I
sorry.
just want to follow up with Chuck on this. So you're saying these definitions are still definitions you plan to use, they'll just be in the
Public Works.
public works standards, okay,
So somebody isn't necessarily going to read those if they're trying to find out
right.
if they want to.
I guess I thought, I was like, oh, getting into which one you're in and defining it is just going to be a headache. And I thought that was why the attorneys were, going to be another source of dispute, I guess. But I guess if it's going to be in the public works standard, it's still
Well, if you
going to be
remember the
source
last
of
piece we had the little pictures of the different width sidewalks and the different zones.
Yeah.
And so those are going to be in the public works standards also. So those definitions need to be there to correspond with those drawings that we prepared to
Right.
go along with this. But so if somebody
Right.
reading that, they can figure out where they're able to put
Right.
fireboxes.
So the next one I have is at 12-14-060, encroachment permit appeal procedure at the bottom of WS 13. And this might just be the fact that I only got to read through this once, given that we had a 1,300-page packet or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's
Changes every time.
It depends on how many times you have to reread the same crap
I thought it was
over.
900 a while ago.
Anyway, way too damn many.
You talking
So-
about regular sessions?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Not yours.
So I
What's all
didn't-
this stuff for this
So I
one
didn't
and
go
the
back
other
up
stuff for that?
in there to reread, but it says an applicant or affected owner occupant of property within 200 linear feet of the boundary of the proposed encroachment may appeal the decision of the engineering director or designee to the city council.
Yeah, now this is one of the corrections that the attorney's office caught too, and the fact that this whole section only applies to major encroachments based upon.
Well, and also, I didn't see, but like I said, I might have missed it, where they were informed in the first place.
That is in permit issuance, right above it in 05.
It is there. Okay, so it was just me forgetting.
And we did do some corrections there to differentiate between minor
Minor and major.
encroachments on how we inform.
Okay. And then again, we, just below that, in proposed code amendment B, we do that whole thing about the resolution of the city council as far as the fee. So it's another
Yeah.
place to fix that.
These are fee schedules. Yeah.
And if you want to know all the places I found city manager, I'll tell you where I found city manager, or you can do it.
Run a search.
I'll do a search.
Word search, all right, cool.
It's probably all in standards and conditions because we
Just pull
Had to
those
make a
from
lot of changes there.
somebody else. That's what I figured. Yeah. That's all I've got.
I mean, that's why we have these, right? So you guys,
Because we love doing this.
you do.
And I have a
Some of us apparently do.
I'll jump in with my
I just
couple.
feel responsible.
On 12.14.080, the recording.
Okay.
So, one of my bugaboos also is passive voice and code writing. But approved encroachment permits shall be recorded against the title. It doesn't say, is that the city or is the applicant? And I assume it's the applicant, but it's one of these passive voice issues where you get into the question.
No, we're doing those recordings. So.
Why not just say the city will record?
They're paying for it, but we want to ensure they get done. So
Okay,
the
well,
intent is for us.
I guess my point is that passive voice is unclear, I think, at times in code writing.
Okay.
And we have passive voice throughout.
I have to say, I don't always agree with that, but this is a great example of where it does.
Yeah, sometimes it
leads to
makes sense.
ambiguity. It definitely leads to ambiguity.
And just general code writing, and because you guys all know this is my hobby horse, but things like, I know that we are taking from other codes, and so what happens, I think, is people just cut and paste and it's easy. I'm not saying that, you didn't put time into this, Chuck, you obviously did, but things like your application shall be accompanied by. Words like accompanied by are not the words we use in our general language, and I don't think they should be in code type of thing. So when we cut and paste, I think we perpetuate sometimes poor code writing. Again, I know that there's a lot of time involved in trying to go through that, so
you would
it hurts me to perpetuate it myself by voting on it.
So instead of shall be accompanied by, you would say...
Applicant must pay the fee up, or must pay a fee according to the master fee schedule. It's very simple, instead of legalese of shall be accompanied by, which no one says. And then it just makes it harder for people to read
attachment.
You think this is bad? Try our specs.
Oh, we will.
They get a lot of those.
Then my last question on, it's a violation. I noticed that some of the codes that you had referred to said any person who erects or caused to be erected. This doesn't put in the cause to be erected part, and so I'm wondering if we could hold liable the person who is actually building the wall. It's not the property owner. So I call ABC Construction. I'd say build me a wall. ABC Construction goes and builds the wall. Is both the property owner and ABC Construction liable, or?
So that would be a Scrivener error that we just lost it in typing it over. Where was that one? That wouldn't have been something that we had purposely tried to do.
It's whoever, with the section that just talks about a permit is required, any person.
Oh, way up front?
Well, like 020A1, persons who erect, doesn't say or cause to be.
Well, under the liability section of 1214.110, the permittee and owner of the benefited property, if different from the permittee, shall be liable to any person who is injured or otherwise suffers damage by reason of any encroachment allowed in accordance with the provisions of this section.
So that's the liability issue, but
right.
Who gets the violation? There's one thing if the wall falls over and there's a liability issue, but who gets the penalty?
Of $1,000 a day.
Of $1,000. The person building the wall, the owner, both?
We can fix that. We can get the or cause in there. That wasn't a conscious punishment.
Okay, so that did remind me though. Are you comfortable? Because this has come up recently, we found, with other things. So for continuous violations, each day will be considered a separate violation, so i.e. $1,000 a day until you tear down that stone wall.
This is major those are major encroachments. Remember, those are
I know,
serious structural.
Imagine how long it would take to tear down the stone wall.
But that would be a structure that is over 4 feet tall in the right-of-way.
But you're saying how much is the penalty? At some point, you put a limit.
What if we said $1,000 a week, or I don't know, something that would add up?
If it's $1,000 a day, they're going to make darn sure they get it down pretty quick.
You would think.
We just saw a lien that is $245,000 now.
Right.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So you sometimes think that if you put the heavy hand of the hammer, that they'll do it. That's not always the case, and then you're stuck with issuing a violation for $100,000.
You don't have
That you're never going to collect.
You don't have discretion on waiving or reducing
The judge
fees
does.
down the line?
The judge does.
Yeah.
We do not.
Staff does not?
We don't have that option. So if all of a sudden we have a judge that's a hard ass.
Actually, if we don't, I think we could certainly write the code that allows us to do that. That should not be a hard code to write. That gives staff the discretion to reduce fees. I'd rather have that
Then
and keep a
reduce it
big
to
fee.
$1,000 a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because somebody could explain why that wouldn't be able to do that within 2 or 3 days or something. And you could say, okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So that will affect several parts of our code if we decide to go down that path. I think it's worth looking at, and Chuck and I can talk to Haley about what that looks like. You start getting into budget matters at some point because we do depend on those dollars and you guys set budget. So let us talk to the team about that and we'll get back to you with more information.
It also does open up the fact that staff now is in a potential for conflicts with, so-and-so they know, so-and-so they don't, who gets a deduct, who doesn't.
Right,
Instead of
yeah.
it being purely judicial, yeah.
Well, but, we hear, every time Tim comes before us, we hear how he tries to work with people, and if they are making efforts towards compliance, he doesn't find them. And so, it seems like it can be the same as that.
Absolutely. And we go through a I'm really tired, a quasi-judicial process on a regular basis as staff. So, namely in planning, a few other departments. So we'll look at it. We'll come back to you guys with something, but we'll do that before we ask you to approve this.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I'm done.
Shane, you missed the one we were expecting.
Which one? There was a 15,000-page packet.
So when you comment, it has to be 17.
No, it stayed the same.
My God, I should have counted those pages. What if you did it
Plus,
3 times? Do you get
Well, you have to reread some of that
We already
stuff.
caught it, but.
I know. You have to reread some of it a whole lot.
All right.
This was
But
great.
good work, and it's you put a lot of time into it. And
Yeah.
other staff did too. It's really.
So,
Thank you.
I got all your comments, so we can go from there.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
we do want to put an appeal process in for the revocation. That's the only.
Is that an appeal to the city manager?
Yes, that's
Same
where we're.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so now you want to do Kronberg Path? You ready?
Well, actually, I'll introduce Jennifer. She will be doing this presentation.
And I also just, while she's getting ready, wanted to let everyone know that Scott Archer's in the room from NCPRD, since he will be working with us on this path, as is Catherine. So thank you guys for coming over.
Do you want to just have them come up?
Do you guys want to come up in case they're...
We're just here to listen, and if you have questions, we're available, but not
Okay.
necessarily need to.
Thanks.
We have not had time to brief them on this presentation, so we'll be watching.
We're just,
So we should be watching their expressions as you go through the.
Exactly. When we see some shocked look back there, we'll...
thank you.
All right, well, thank you for having me. We've got a couple slides here that we want to go through, and then we'll take questions from all of you. One thing, the focus of this is to give us direction on what alignment we should proceed for producing engineering drawings. And let's get started. So, here's our original master plan. What I would like to focus in on this conversation is the circled area up on the screen. This is our elevated section that we're creating a bridge through the tree canopy.
Can it be focused?
Maybe it was enlarged. And that's why it's-
Okay.
Yeah, probably not that one. That's a PDF file.
Okay.
The next one should be fine.
It should be clear. So here's a couple constraints and concerns that we've kind of identified. We have ADA access that we need to meet, a permit schedule. There's an existing sewer line. We have some trees we'd like to protect on site. There's ODOT right away. And of course, we'd like to come in budget if we can. So these are options that we're looking at. And first I want to walk through option 1. Oh, it doesn't show it. Okay.
We won't be able to see you.
Is that okay? The screen isn't going, so I need to come up here. So, a couple trees that we want to protect. You have your white oak here. You have 2 more white oaks here, here, and then the sequoia here. This alignment starts through here. Through this is your floodplain line right here. This option has a fill around here that allows you to come up and walk through here. Then you would approach the bridge. The whole reason for this fill,
Thank you.
is it on?
Yes.
The whole reason for this fill and kind of a boardwalk section through here is to help reduce some cost through this option. We've identified that the bridge is a lot more expensive than we anticipated. So, later in in this presentation, you're going to see we're going to call out two options for two actually looks at extending this bridge all the way outside of the floodplain. And the reason for that is because we're not sure if we're going to be able to actually mitigate in the floodplain to do this option how it is. So that's the reason for that. Here's a couple renderings looking at for option one. Would be the entrance from McLaughlin. Here's the next one. It's a straight shot. It is a straight shot all the way through until you get to the soft path where you then meander. Option two, same deal. We're still trying to protect our trees, so we're definitely going right in between them there. This option comes up a little bit closer to McLaughlin here. This allows us to shorten our bridge, but it also allows us to do a nice canopy through the treetop area. We do have a viewpoint here, as in the other option as well. And here's a couple renderings. That's your viewpoint there that you'd be able to step out onto and see. And there's just the other side of it, looking at what it kind of looks like. But the next one, it is showing you we are fairly close to McLaughlin. The benefit to that is we are also closer in the right-of-way in the ODOT right-of-way. That's good and bad. We do have to negotiate with ODOT, but it allows us to build there without any issue. So here's some comparisons. The top line is going to show you what the length of the actual structure is. That's not the full length of the path, it's just the structure. And that's how we're identifying it. The master plan called for a 12-foot pathway. As we started looking at our code, a 10-foot pathway is actually in our code for a type 2 review. So we've decided a 10-foot would also help with costs. It's reduced the width by 2 feet. It also gets us through Planning Commission a little easier.
And actually, the 10 foot's a maximum pathway in our code
Width.
It's what?
It's a
It's a maximum
How could that be? I mean, trolley trail's wider than
Trolley
that.
trail isn't on private property.
property.
Oh,
It's in right of way.
okay.
So our 17th path, for example, is in right of way. So there's a difference between how they get treated. So in land use code, 10 foot is the maximum trail we can construct without variances considered.
Well, we could fix that.
And need to. Okay.
So it's a positive impact for each of these options. The master plan definitely has a curvature linear pathway. Option 1.2, which is the option that you would have the straight bridge all the way across. You do have some tree removal there, or minimizing tree removal by taking it directly through the path. That was one of our options. We want to try to reduce how many trees we're taking out. 1.1, similar to 1.2. And then option 2 gives us kind of that curvature again through that canopy. It also minimizes permitting, and it is our least cost option that we'll talk about in a second. The downside is it is close to McLaughlin. So you would venture up close to there.
So what's the difference between 1.1 and 1.2?
Yeah, and we don't have maps of the difference in that, or?
The difference is only we would be building a fill area to reduce the cost and the span of the bridge instead of building a section of bridge for that.
So go back to
here.
There you go.
So this is the fill area. If we cannot do that due to being able to have to mitigate within the floodplain area, we would have to build another structure piece here, another span, which would also cost additional funds.
Okay, and so is that option 1.1 or 1.2?
1.1 is the fill.
That's fine, sorry, that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, 1.1 is the fill option.
Okay.
And 1.2 would be, if we couldn't do 1.1, would be 1.2, would be the additional span of the bridge.
And if you build the rest of the bridge, the surface level path is asphalt, I take it?
No, it's all concrete.
It's all concrete.
Everything's concrete throughout the entire project.
Why?
That would
be a question for you, Chuck.
So this is before I want to finish that question before you answer. We are now taking what could have been an extraordinary experience on a curvilinear path through the canopy, away from McLaughlin Boulevard, so you get that 5 minutes of peaceful interlude from the insanity of our lives, on a path that's just like the one that crosses the lake, as opposed to a concrete one. Because now when you make it a concrete path, the loads are substantially higher, and so the structure has to be substantially more expensive.
Is a concrete path too.
What?
Triton's Bridge is a concrete path.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's likely concrete.
No, the part actually across the lake is not concrete. It's a board. It's like a fiber board. I guarantee it. I've walked it 1,000 times.
Huh. I mean, it looks like a lightweight precast concrete board that they've precast to go in.
It's the same fiber board they used on one of the bridges in Portland.
To answer your question, it's specified in the master plan as a concrete path. So when the master plans were approved, it's specified as a concrete path.
But that particular, so that's the one piece of the master plan we're keeping, and we're getting rid of the fact that it's curvilinear and beautiful and goes to the trees, and now we're putting it up by McLaughlin, but we're keeping the concrete part of the master plan.
You're talking about the act rate. No, we're talking about the question was about the act rate.
No, I'm talking about the part on.
Well, my question was about the act rate.
She asked about act rate.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean,
I'll go back to my question.
I guess I was just trying to picture the at-grade path and the fill area, and is it just a slope? It just will operate like a little hill?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any sidings on it or anything. It would just be
A gradual.
a concrete path on a gradual
So
slope.
that brown is basically a pile of dirt with slopes.
You would have the proper slope, so
On the side.
So it
on the
doesn't.
sides of it, and that's why it goes out that far, right? That whole area. You made me take out the picture that I should have left.
You just
I did.
Well, so anticipating the next question, would it be cheaper? I will say that I was really, as I can hear in the mayor's voice, disappointed that the money projections weren't as solid. Although, frankly, I didn't realize we were relying on those master plan money projections, or I probably would have probed that a little bit harder, because that whole master planning process was very quick, and this is a lesson for any of the other parks that were master planned in that one fell swoop of 6 months or 3 months that they did it, that we need to, I had some concerns at the time about the consultant and how thorough their work is, so I guess I'm not terribly surprised by this development, but can we, we can revisit the master, would we save money? Could we build a 12-foot path? Could we build a more curvilinear path, et cetera, if we did it out of something other than concrete?
We are not even involved.
No? Yeah.
So, so here's our updated cost for 2017 for each option. This would be looking at the master plan design, building the entire structure. Here is our budget, $1,769,100. Option 2 are broken out because you do have a different lengths in the actual bridge. If we're allowed to do the fill, then it would be cheaper to do that option. And then there is option 2, which so we've got left over $50,000 in contingency. It's really not a lot. Our bridge costs were about 46% higher than what were projected in the master plan.
And that's for a basic bridge.
A basic bridge, no bells and whistles, a basic bridge.
So I'll echo this. I'm a little shocked that we went into this using the master plan, because I don't think there was any engineers anywhere near that thing. for the estimate, I assumed that some engineer somewhere did at least a back of the envelope to say, yeah, we should be able to do that elevated pathway for this amount of money. So this is not any, blame it at you because you weren't even on staff then, but.
That came in at the start of this application, but yes, we did up it from actually the master plan. I added new percentages from what they had to the engineering, but I had to use the dollar amount per square foot that they gave me for the bridge, because that's what we expect out of those consultants, is to give us realistic numbers. If they don't give us realistic numbers,
what's the point of having
a master plan?
And usually they could be conservative. You would hope they would have some little higher contingency in there, but.
So, we actually added almost 400,000 in our own estimates to what was in the master plan for the grant.
So
even with that, we're 820,000 short just to meet estimates, and that gives us zero contingency.
So if we were to do your fill option up to whatever point that is, and make it a 10-foot path, and not make it a concrete path, make it so it's not supporting that kind of weight. And I'll tell you why the argument was made initially for the concrete path. They wanted to be able to drive service vehicles on it.
We are required to drive service vehicles on it.
So really, why?
Exactly.
That's in the grant. The grant is requiring us to design it to hold service vehicles. So they won't pay for it if we don't design it for those weights.
And it's also in the grant that it would be a concrete path.
Could you switch from concrete to asphalt?
After you get past the elevated area?
It doesn't help.
It's not enough. It's not enough. I don't think
it's a much lighter material.
It's all about
so
the
structure wouldn't have to be nearly as big. But if you're just supporting bikes and pedestrians, which is what this is made for.
What does it define service here?
It is basically an ambulance, so it's a pretty healthy load.
You were hoping for a 4x4.
I was hoping for enough ambiguity to define the way.
Well, I don't know if you answered your question. You said, is it defined?
Yeah.
And you said,
it's actually defined in the ANSI code that they've referenced that we have to design the structure to. So we have to meet loading, which I think is a 13,000 pound vehicle.
okay.
But,
Even though it's pedestrian.
and I guess this is standard.
Is it that way for all?
Troutdale, not Troutdale. Where is Cabela's? Tualatin. And when they built that path, they hit the same requirement on that whole elevated walkway that's on the backside of
Right, on the backside of Cabela's and all of that.
Yeah. And it escalated their costs substantially when they had to meet the requirements of the city.
Which portion of our government deems that intelligent?
Oh, your favorite.
The Transportation Commission runs Connect Oregon process.
Just wanted to know who to throw under the bus. Again. So, to build what was built in the original master plan, you're now saying it's going to cost in the neighborhood of $2,600.
2,600,000.
2 million.
$2 million.
We would need another 800,000 without any contingency to get there. And I would never recommend that I can almost guarantee you on any of these options, we will be back at this table once we get further down the design talking about the additional budget authorization that we're going to need out of the SAFE program to cover the difference. The question is, which option are we going to need to address and where do we want to go? How big of a gap do we want to have?
Or is there a combination of what we're providing that we can then move forward with? Because we're not, there are some options here to do a combination, possibly.
Right, so I guess, who makes the determination on the fill?
I am the floodplain administrator, and I do not believe it's possible.
It's a lot of fill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a lot of fill.
Oh,
I do not think there is enough land on this park for me to mitigate that. Wow.
If we back off the fill a little bit and bring it in a bit, then
We're talking, I estimated about 8,000 yards.
it surprised us how much was there.
so could you put back up the slide that showed the option 2 and going close to McLaughlin?
Do
Okay.
you want to see, is this,
That's fine.
okay?
So the other issue that was part of discussions before the prior council was the concern, and I definitely have seen this already, and I guess is that people are, no matter where we put it, but it's going to be worse with this option, are going to walk across McLaughlin to the River Road house. They're going to cross, I mean, it happens now. People do it. But having the path get that close is going to make that even more attractive. I mean, wherever we put the path, I think we ought to be having conversations with ODOT about Jersey barriers with the fence on top like they did by Tacoma Station or something to make that.
Like a screening option?
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to a screening option along there too, just for safety concerns as well.
You're talking about screening between the roadway and the path.
Yeah.
She's talking about.
I'm talking about in the middle of the
Oh.
So what they
99.
did up by, if you look at McLaughlin up by Tacoma, there were people that used to cross there all the time. So there was already a Jersey barrier that ran down the middle of it.
And people
they
just climbed
added
over
these
that.
4-foot, 3-foot things on
They're
top
not
of the
that
Jersey
tall.
barrier.
The safety screens are probably
2 feet?
half 2
The
feet
Jersey
tall.
barrier in the middle in this location would be extremely problematic.
Well, and it doesn't, I like your concept better, but ODOT will push back on that because, and CPRD for that matter, their access to be able to do maintenance is meant to be just past that. It's meant to be that sort of brown area.
Yeah, the downside of option 2, this is actually, I mean, this whole discussion is about a trade-offs, right? You got cost versus what you really want versus access versus other issues. The downside to this is it would open up a lot of negotiations with ODOT on use of that right-of-way. There would probably have to be an IGA for maintenance of the path within the right-of-way, which is not part of this agreement. The ODOT has already verbally told us they will not grant an access driveway for maintenance vehicles between the guardrail and the bridge. They will not allow any NCPRD or anybody's rigs to enter and exit the park from that location.
Even though they're all doing it now.
Right.
And we have boat trailers parked there.
We have
And
no
they'll
active.
probably.
Yeah.
So they were actually talking about putting a fence up themselves to prohibit.
The problem with the fence that they wanted was that they wanted to put it on the boundary of our property and theirs, which is
About
a
20
heck
feet
of a
into
lot
the
of
park.
feet into the park.
You can see the black line up there is actually the right-of-way line, so
Yeah.
beyond the sewer line, so it's ways in there.
That's one of my many problems with actually both designs, is that we spend an awful lot of time at their right-of-way. And anytime we do that,
Option 1, I don't think we're in at all, except right at the very end.
right at the beginning, you're in it twice, aren't you? Well, you're in it
Well, we
the whole time.
have to enter somewhere.
I mean, at some point.
Again,
Right
they
there.
have
But so we talked about, when we walked it last time, we talked about swinging out further.
We're dead center between the two trees with that.
Right, we talked about going on the outside of the other tree.
That would
It's
require
just-
right-of-way property acquisition.
Yeah.
Potentially, which
This is
may or may not cost
Our
us anything.
property,
Yeah.
Part
there,
of
so
it
we would
is,
have to get additional property, and then you also have length.
there was an added
that's
problem with
anyway.
the property, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but one of the issues was that when we applied for the grant, we did not disclose that there was any need for any property.
Right, because the master plan indicated that we were going to try to stay all within ODOT's right-of-way and the park proper.
And once we do that, my understanding is it actually causes problems with the grant.
It could require federal, ODOT right-of-way acquisition procedures for the acquisition of right, which is, the property probably is less than the appraisal. But the bigger issue here, and I guess that we haven't really mentioned,
It's timeline.
is timeline.
You want this
You are
built
getting to the point where we will not make the 18 construction season with too many changes.
Well, so if we did option 1.2 or whatever, the one that's without the fill, the $2 million option, trying to figure out where to get the rest of the money. That could be done next season?
Yes, barring any hiccups, yes.
Okay. I mean, I guess in my mind,
We have one hiccup that we'll mention right.
right.
There's another one?
There's another one.
Opening doors every time.
Just get it all out there.
Like, oh, yeah, well, we want to tell you this also.
It's the AD thing in the
Right,
staff
right.
report. You guys haven't mentioned it yet.
Is it the 2B?
Yeah.
2A?
2A, the A or the B?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether we're running parallel to the.
Oh, right.
We have a greenway, limit greenway requirement for review, and we're recommending that we do that in parallel.
And I would agree with that.
But the only hiccup, I mean, the risk there is if they come back with anything that says changing the alignment or changing, aesthetics of this bridge, we would then have to either ask for more money and possibly schedule and wouldn't make the 2,000. So there's a risk in there that you need to be aware of.
I mean, once we authorize the structural engineers to actually start doing all the steel, concrete designs and spans and everything, we're starting to put out some fairly significant money on whichever bridge we start to actually design.
And so even though it says concrete and we have some obligations in the grant, the boardwalk around between the trees, you think is an exception to that?
It all has to support the vehicle.
It all has to support it.
But the boardwalk construction is different in the fact that it's the type of construction, so it's more like, steel post pile and a lot closer together versus here they're showing only 2 beds out there, so each one of those is like 90 feet spans, so those are huge spans for that particular structure.
So, in other words, just 2 columns,
Right.
or whatever they're gonna,
Yes.
how they're gonna do it.
Yeah, so that's the reason why they wanted to get straight, is so they can make those as long as possible, because the price, the superstructure isn't, the substructure, it costs a lot of money, so the more columns you add, the closer you get, the least efficiency you get. So right now, we have to be honest, we've approached this about cost.
How can we stay within
So
the budget?
if cost isn't as big a deal, then we can reapproach it not thinking about cost.
Well, since at least 2 of you, if not 3 of you, weren't on council when this previous thing, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. So when we built the bridge across the lake, the beginning part of this trail, the original option that was most affordable had this ramp thing to get you onto
I remember that.
onto the path.
Yeah.
I was pushing back really hard on that and went out to Metro and got additional money because I got council to agree that if I could get additional money, and we were talking $60,000 or $80,000 or something.
I thought it was 400.
Yeah,
Something
it
was
wasn't
400.
a lot more. It was, we were having to come up with that, but we were having to come up with 240 in any case or something like that. Anyway, Metro got us it all. Got all of it for us. Whatever. Now we have, I think, a very elegant entry to that bridge. It's beautiful. It's something that we can be proud of for the next 80 years or 100 years or however long people continue to use that project. We're at one of those points again, and yes, now it's an $800,000 question.
I guess one of the things I will point out though with this is that just because we're showing short links, that's not our intent. There will be curves on those elements. It's just the beam structures themselves obviously don't curve, right? So for the bridge. So they are showing way more angular in that particular option than I envisioned the final. There is room to flex in the concrete deck. That is one nice thing about concrete, is that the forms don't have to stay along the beam lines.
Don't have to what?
We can do, because there's steel in it, you can actually put curvilinear.
You can cantilever out over the...
There is cantilever already, so they're going to be cantilevering more. So, on those pier abutment locations.
But that's not all of it. I mean, part of it, so when I think about infrastructure that we build like this, it's particularly when it's in a park and it's and getting all esoteric. The purpose of parks and the human experience is to escape from the insanity of our built choked lives, right, for a few minutes. If we start whittling away at that experience, in other words, you're on McLaughlin for, 15% of the time or 20% of the time you're on this trail, or, it's like angles through the trees, which apparently it doesn't have to be. You keep downgrading that experience, and I guarantee you, at some point in 20 years, somebody will go, why in God's name did they do this instead of this beautiful thing that they could have done? And the answer will be $800,000. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know.
I guess I don't see the straight line as, yes, it's not as nice, but I think because it's separated from McLaughlin and has the trees as a buffer.
The plan option one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the option of the two versions, I strongly prefer option one, just simply because you're off McLaughlin longer.
I don't like being next to McLaughlin.
And you're,
I
more
think
tree buffer.
That is far superior. I wish we weren't on McLaughlin for those few feet past the boardwalk. And that's simply to shorten the span so that we can reduce the cost, right?
Yeah, otherwise you're looking at the master plan.
No, and avoid potentially
It's to
losing
avoid the
funding.
trees.
And the trees.
And to save those
Right.
trees.
Yeah.
There were 3 reasons.
Well,
There was to not acquire property that isn't ODOT's too.
Right.
yes, but it is somebody who actually cares about the natural environment, cares about having a beautiful
Wasn't there
experience.
something about the grant that we hadn't disclosed that?
Maybe, apparently.
So-
What, the property
Yeah.
acquisition?
But, so I get the part where we're going in between those two trees. That's okay. You've now gotten between those two trees. Other than the cost of building structure, why do you go back to McLaughlin at this point?
Why
The
do you
only
not
reason
start?
you do that is so that you're on solid
'Cause
ground again, which is cheaper.
It's cheaper too,
Before you go
have
back
to start
on.
the.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Is that
Okay.
You could be coming through here and doing that, right?
Yes, yes.
If the cost.
You would do it like you'd combine, right, option 2, and you could
But it
come
would
up
be
and
more
then
elevated.
come back into option
Oh, no,
1.
That's,
Yeah, we could do any of those things if that's the way you want to get.
So I guess what I'm trying to get is, I'd like to look at solutions that keep us away from McLaughlin to the greatest extent possible. Don't cut the trees. Provide a more of a sinuous path than a angled, changes. I'm okay with, X amount of straight. It's better than some of the other issues. And I'm fine with it being a 10-foot path. I don't think it needs to be 12-foot either. And so if that saves us significant money, let's make it 10-foot. I'd be curious to see what the master plan design would be if you made it a 10-foot path. Well, and you said you probably can't do the fill, so that was the other half of it.
Yeah, are you saying basically fill option is not an option?
I don't see how they're going to ever make that kind of.
Could you do offsite mitigation?
I think we have to do it on site, right?
Based on the reading
has
I've
to
been
be-
doing about our next hearing, I would say they do have to do it.
Yeah, and chapter 18 is pretty specific.
So, can we, part of my concern is budget. It's a lot of cash. Any thoughts? Where you would like to come up with that kind of
Well, I mean,
Basically, what you're describing would put us approximately $300,000 short if we stay with that option 1 and tweak the boardwalk some, so we're not back to McLaughlin, but with 0 contingencies.
I think
So,
you're higher than 9. You're getting away from the boardwalk.
so there's some things that could be done there, but we're still talking minimum of 300,000 using these numbers, plus a contingency amount that we have to figure into, come back to you later on. And if you guys are okay with that, we can start working down that path and come back to you. But
So those of you that sit on JPAC and know the MTIP process, are there any pools of
Oh, sure.
last minute
Got-
fill-in money?
No, that, not
$350,000.
last minute, no.
Yeah.
Now, our best shot would be to go to Metro like we did last time and say, do you got anything left over in your trails
Yeah.
thing? And they would roll their eyes because it was exactly the same
That's part of the
piece of
same.
trail they
yeah.
were expecting us to.
So we can go down that path. It will slow down the process if we're dependent on a grant. So part of this has been making sure that we can get inside the window that we've been promising the community. There are options internally as well. We have SAFE funding. This is predominantly funded out of SAFE, but those funds have been allocated towards other projects, which means that you lose something when you do that.
Right.
Staff is happy to come back to you with those options as well. If you want to hear them, if they're off the table, then we should know that now and we'll take them off the table. Just knowing that grant processes or going to outside agencies tend to take more time.
We do have a little bit of discretionary money in SAFE, but you're going to be you're using it up.
On the first project.
Yeah.
So I'm a little cautious about expecting that there wouldn't be fallout or reduction in projects from today. You would have to expect that there would be.
What about all the transportation SDCs we're about to get?
It's absolutely an option for us to have those discussions and to talk about infrastructure improvements, but those are typically...
Not transportation.
No? There you go.
Not in a park.
It's a connector.
It is not on any regional trail map. It is not part of our transportation master plan. You would play heck convincing me that it's a capacity improving project for transportation.
What did the Transportation Commission consider it?
That's how we got the grant, wasn't it?
What? But it's not, SDCs are a whole different thing, and Peter could go into that. But SDCs are very restrictive. They're the most restrictive funds we have, are SDC funds.
Well, and I could see why SDC funds for neighborhoods on the other side of 224 couldn't,
No, but
or
we
shouldn't be
think
paid
about the
there, but we
SDC
have,
funds that we're about to
we're gonna have
receive
some
in our
for downtown.
which
So
is
the-
definitely served.
The way that cities usually get SDCs for a project like this would be by having a trail master plan SDC. So the most recent city to do it was Newburgh. I think that's being challenged in court right now, but they certainly have done one. Westland has done one as well. And, you know, that puts in an STC for that specific purpose.
That's creating a new SDC.
Yeah, we're talking about
but normally this wouldn't be something that would go into a transportation STC. Normally with the transportation STC, you're kind of within the same construct that you'd be with a gas tax. So it's either roads or, you know, the adjacent connected path to a road for those sort of gas tax.
But not the connected path to transit?
But this is in a park too, so it would be definitely eligible for the parks SDCs. This is what parks SDCs would be set aside, which our parks SDCs go to NCPRD. So that's the SDC that would be eligible for this particular grant.
I will also remind you that there's a danger in double counting the SDCs and how we'd like to expend them. Scott has been an incredible partner with us over the last several months on talking about Milwaukee Bay Park, which is another goal of the city, and looking at some of those funds going towards that park. And we're not even sure we're going to hit that number right now, though it's looking like it. So that's just more of a caution.
But yeah, so it's the best funding scenario we have for this particular type of issue is the SAFE program. It's the one geared toward active transportation, specifically set aside for active transportation.
But it increases our grant dependency for other projects within in the project list.
Does what?
It means that we're more grant dependent on the remaining
because
projects because we're shifting.
Right, so we're, and when we calculated that, we calculated a 40% match, didn't we, on our big projects? Monroe, Stanley.
I can't remember. There is a number specifically. I mean, it's like 60% of all of the projects is SAFE, and then 40% is from grants.
Right, but we calculated in our match for those grants.
Right.
We did.
And when
set
we
aside-
calculated it in, I'm recalling it being calculated in a substantially higher number than 10.7 because we're watching most cities lose out if that's all they're throwing out.
We calculated in a fixed match amount of cash, which I think is a little over $5 million.
We can come back to you with some scenarios, and if you guys want to make a phone call to Metro or to others and start that conversation, that'll give us a sense for that. We're hearing a general direction about where you'd like to go.
Well, you heard my loud voice. I don't know if you heard a general direction.
No,
I didn't hear anybody say no to that.
Well, I guess the question is, are we willing to, we have some people here who will jump up and down if we aren't ready to build it next year.
Yeah, no,
And so are all
I might
these-
join them.
Yeah.
And we've heard that, I mean, those of us who work at the farmer's market booth, I'm sure we've all heard that from plenty of people.
Well, and not only the people, but wouldn't we face losing the grant if we don't act on it timely?
Well, we have to ask for an extension.
Yeah, but it's not
Not
fully
guaranteed.
granted that we get that.
That's one thing ODOT has said that isn't that difficult. They didn't seem to be too worried about the extensions.
But still.
Still is a risk.
And I didn't say anything, and I probably don't need to, but I will also express my shared concern about crossing at that location. I think that we are asking for problems if we allow for the path to get that close to that crosswalk.
Yeah.
And we are continuing to have conversations with ODOT about closing that. It doesn't matter what sign you put up.
Right.
We'll have people cross there if it's an easy access point.
But was anybody interested in option 2? So I don't know that that's
Anybody
really,
concerned?
I'm not.
So we're great leaving it off.
Yeah.
Thank
No.
you.
So if you could come back with some kind of a hybrid that, and a new price around that, and I'll put out some feelers for more cash.
And I'll just say I absolutely do not like the idea of taking money away from other projects.
No, I agree.
So as close as we can get to the lower red number,
Yeah.
that's just.
And I'll buy a lottery ticket. And if I win, I'll pay it all.
Oh my God, we got that on tape.
And I have a question for you, Chuck. It wasn't clear to me in the past, and I apologize, this might be going backwards just a little bit, but it was saying the delay potentially from Planning Commission if there were major changes. Is that, am I reading that correctly? It's Planning Commission where those changes might cause delay?
Yeah.
And I was wondering how we might just minimize surprises. Can they do a work session?
One of the problems is that we've been trying to figure out a way to not have this as a type 3. And on the Willamette Greenway piece, the word we're getting is that it will be a type 3 no matter what.
Even if we don't do the big fill
Right.
stuff, okay.
The fill actually is not a planning commission thing at all. That's just a grading permit. So the question comes in is how much money are we willing to spend while we're waiting for a planning commission? In order to meet next construction season, we need to get the structural guys going. They will take 3 to 4 months to design the bridge. So at this point, right now, as of today, if you were able to make a decision today, we would not get out to bid till May.
So I have faith in the wisdom of our planning commission, generally speaking. So I'm perfectly comfortable running in parallel lines.
And that was the recommendation from Danny, the planning director.
If you can come back to us with some kind of a hybrid that solves some of those, keeps us away from McLaughlin.
If we can't
Can't come up with
If
a
we
hybrid.
can't come up with a solution that's going to be closer to the red line versus further away. How are people somewhat okay with option 2? Or are we so far off base that you're concerned enough that it stops the project or that it significantly changes the project? I'm just worried that if we don't find money and if we start if we continue to look for too long, we'll lose.
Show us option 2 again. That was the one that.
That's
with
the one right around
and then you
Well,
spend
it
a lot
puts
of
it
time
right
on
at
McLaughlin.
Yeah, that's on McLaughlin.
So that one's off, right?
Off.
Yeah, it was, and then 1.1
1.1
is just,
1
is with the fill.
1.12 is the only one that sounds like we are all
oh,
kind
right,
of
because
sort of
1.1
okay
we
with.
can't do, sorry.
Because we can't do the fill.
Right.
I mean,
So
the only
you-
way to do the fill would drastically change NCPRD's master plan for that park. Because we would be doing a lot of excavation along the banks and along the sides of the street.
So no matter what, we're gonna have to come up with more money. Yeah, everybody is recognizing that there. Okay.
The number that's way off to begin with, that was a consultant or what? Where did we get the figure that we thought we were comfortable with and then discovered not so?
Well, the master plan's only like a year old. It wasn't his.
2 years.
Oh, it was
It's more
done
than that.
over Christmas
Isn't that when
in
they did those
January.
4.4?
It's probably 3 years old, 3.5
I was
years
here
old.
when it was, I've only been here 2 years.
Okay.
You were here when it was
I was here when
approved.
it was approved.
So we were
Okay.
going through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, the public meetings were like December, January, February. And it was Lango Hansen Architects, did 3 of them at once, and it was this kind of, or 4, and it was this very kind of compacted, rushed process, and yeah, this is definitely an eye-opener that we have to give all their numbers a.
And we took their numbers and took the bridge numbers and added to it for what we felt would be needed for a Connect Oregon grant, because we knew there'd be additional hoops we had to go through, additional things we had to do. So then we added to that. So the original number in the master plan was like about 1.3 for this piece.
Out of curiosity, in all of these numbers, how much of that is messing around with ODOT? Like ODOT making us replace poles or do things that have actually nothing to do with our trail?
None at the moment. We haven't got anything that, I guess the only thing would be is in the bridge number, there would be, because the structural engineers are estimating it now, they have the weights. So they're designing it for a utility vehicle. So that would be I don't know what percentage of that would be, but that would be the only thing in these numbers.
I mean, it's like $1,000 per linear foot difference that we're looking at here. I mean, that's a huge amount of money.
Theirs was half, so the master plan number was half of the estimate.
So, just so that for future reference, I've got this in my brain. If we weren't using Connect Oregon money, we could do a lighter bridge. There's nothing in state law that requires, if you're doing a bridge for pedestrians and bikes, ambulances have to be able to drive across it.
That'd be correct. We'd be subject to building department rules because we're in a park. But I do not know what those are, but that's what would be subject to. Which I believe is like this pound per square foot.
It's what?
Pound per square foot for the pathway. Just like decks and anything else, would be subject to the building department rules.
Parks may require road access though, for maintenance vehicles.
I don't know, it's a 240-foot long bridge. People should be able to walk.
200 foot, right? Even
Well,
EMTs should be able to walk
master
with
plan's more like
those wheel
500.
gurneys.
The master plan one is actually 500. We've cut it down to try to come within budget.
I have one more question. Regarding the planning commission's review, is there anything we could do legislatively that takes that off the table or specifically makes that a type 2?
There's no type 2 for Willamette Greenway.
It's Willamette Greenway review.
But that's because of our own code?
Yes.
Or what I'm saying is, do we control that rule or is that someone?
Good question.
I always get
Shaking his
stymied by our own rules are keeping us
Yes,
from doing things.
I
It's
know.
our rules. Like, are they?
It's
I
our
don't know.
code, yeah.
Right, it's your code, but if you were to dial that back for a Willamette Greenway, I mean, I think that there'd be a lot of people who would come out.
Not for Willamette Greenway, for this specific project.
Well, but the type of review is triggered by it being in the Willamette Greenway.
But only because our code says so, right?
No,
the
the Willamette Greenway
Greenway
map
map.
is
So
based on
it's
it.
mapped.
That's it.
So there's no way around it. And not a legislative fix.
I mean, you could say that a Willamette Greenway is not a type 3, but the problem is that there are a lot of projects in the Willamette Greenway that you would want it to be type 3.
But could you say, well, I mean, can you craft it so that they're generally type 3, except for those that are,
City parks.
Except for the city's the applicant. I mean,
There might be ways, but the problem is it's not within our timeframes.
Yeah.
Because it's still a code to change.
I'm really not worried about them wanting to change this so badly that it screws up the timeline.
Well, they will likely be cognizant of the timeline and the facts that if they were to start doing major revisions, you would lose the season and possibly lose a grant.
So, are we all more or less on the same page? We're going to see a hybrid. We're going to do parallel tracks.
And we're going to probably have to come back to you with what we are seeing as the funding requirements in order to achieve this. And we'll look at any scenarios we can for how to fund it. And we'll wait to hear from you on what you can find out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Add to the calendar.
Thank you. Oops.
And just so you know, we are about 20 minutes over on time. But this one has been promised to be a little brief,
So next up, we have our council goal climate action plan update with Public Works Director Peter Passarelli and our climate action plan intern Tristan Sewell.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good evening. With me tonight is Tristan. I think met Tristan maybe back in June. Gave a presentation at a climate action update. We'll be giving you an update on where we are in progress of developing the climate action plan. Since that last update in June, we spent some time developing a request for proposal to solicit consultant services to help us develop a climate action plan. Tonight, we'll give you an overview of where we are on that RFP, on that process. Talk about the timeline, the scope of work that we requested the consultants to do, as well as the evaluation criteria. The plan that we've got is intended to identify the existing and potential vulnerabilities and develop a set of prioritized actions that will help protect people and resources from the ongoing impacts of climate change. It's the intention to drastically lessen the impacts on our long-term impacts of climate change. So I'll start off a little bit on the timeline of where we are. We put together the RFP over the summer and released it for solicitation on August 17th, this past month. We've just recently passed the deadline for changes in questions. We had a lot of questions on the RFP. Tristan has put together a FAQ that is getting ready to release tomorrow to the consultants to talk about the questions that they had. And I can also tell you we did not receive any protests as of 4 o'clock this afternoon.
We
didn't receive any protest on the RFP as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, so we passed that deadline as well. The proposals will be, submission deadline is next Wednesday, September 13th, at 2 in the afternoon. We'll get those proposals and review them and then determine if we're going to do interviews. We've got interviews potentially scheduled for the week of September 25th. And based on those interviews and the evaluations of the proposals, we'll make a selection and then post that notice of intent and then proceed from there. We anticipate going through this process with the consultant to have a draft climate action plan back to the City Council next summer, July 17th. Work session, not work session, the regular session.
So to lay out the scope of work on the climate action plan itself and what we asked for in the RFP, first is to inventory my greenhouse gas, or to re-inventory my greenhouse gas inventory and kind of cover up the errors or shortcomings that I was unable to complete myself, whether it was lack of resources, lack of time, lack of know-how, lack of access to data, or inexperience with data sets.
And as an example on that, those are things like transportation coming through the city. We have a couple of major roadways, and there isn't a great location for us to gather how many trucks and vehicles are coming through that access point and how we should capture those. So it's stuff like that, making sure that those things are right scoped to national standards.
I think there's a way to do it. It's just that I don't know how. I'll put it that way. So then we asked for a community engagement plan, which is essentially asking them to tell us how they would go about the public engagement process, how would they work with our community, bring stakeholders on board, and make sure that we're getting as many voices and the right groups of voices to the table. A big concern for me personally is making sure underrepresented groups are involved, and particularly youth. I think it's very important to plan forward and target younger audiences because they're the people who are going to be most impacted by this over the long term. I have some interesting thoughts about that, but I'll save that for another time. Then, of course, the last is the plan itself, which, of course, is the draft, I should say. It's a draft cap based on council's approval from there, which will be a prioritized list and an organized list of actions. And I'll get into its organization in another slide or two. So this is the language pulled directly from the RFP. So this is the cap itself. So number 3 on the last slide. First of all, glossary of definitions. Want to make sure everything's clearly understood. The policy context, so national, state, county, metro, and then now here within the city limits. Aligning it with the city's vision statement and action plan. There's a lot in there already that really is climate action planning on its own. So making sure that we're staying true to that statement, that's very important. And then the organized greenhouse gas mitigation items in pursuit of those goals as stated in the vision statement. And then very importantly, means for measurement and verification of progress. A climate action plan is not a final document. This is something that will be revised and updated down the line, and so we want to make sure that we can track that progress and those successes, or even cases where we're not successful, we need to be able to be aware of how much and in which cases. So pretty straightforward stuff there. Other topics that we've asked them to involve. So this is the scope of the greenhouse gases involved. We're using ICLEI's 5 basic emission generating activities. This is more or less the US standard as far as scoping your emissions. I should say this represents the bare minimum. You can scope larger than this. Some things missing from this include upstream or life cycle emissions. So say the shirt I'm wearing and the emissions of its creation. What is in this is just the emissions from its disposal. Those fall under number 5, solid waste.
Council approved these, just as a reminder, in June when we came get it.
Other things that are missing right now is air travel. You only see on-road passenger and freight vehicle travel, and there's probably a handful more, but those are the ones that really stand out. So this is a pretty basic, solid, and normal picture of scoping emissions. Yeah, there could be more involved, but this is more than a good place to start. So I wanted to talk about the approach to this and the organizational structure. So you start with goals, you move on to strategies, and then those strategies are comprised of actions. Goals are the really broad things, so that's something as broad as saying getting more people on bikes and fewer people in single occupancy vehicles. That's all you need to say. The strategy would then be things of supporting bike connectivity and safety or mass transit options within the city limits. still kind of broad, not necessarily specific language, but you can start to get a little more specific. Then the actions would be something very specific, like a list of planned projects or a very specific funding tool or anything along those lines. That's where the real details come into play, is in the actions category. So this would represent our hierarchical organizational structure, and then you team that up with those 5 basic emission factors, and that's more or less an outline of the plan right there. Pretty straightforward. There are some elements, I don't have a slide to this, but things that I'm very concerned about with, and I would truly like to see involved in this plan, as well, are issues related to climate resilience. And so Peter made that point in his opening. A lot of this is about resilience and adaptation to the realities of climate change, not just about mitigating their impacts and mitigating our contribution to climate change, but also being prepared for some inevitabilities, as I think we're all experiencing to a certain extent right now, whether it's the fires, whether it's the fires or whether it's hurricanes. I think we have a lot of recent events that show us what's at risk here, and that the reality is coming, if not here already. Not to be able to moving on to our evaluation criteria. Actually, Mitch came up with this, but I wanted to highlight it nonetheless, that this lays out how we will be evaluating our applicants. Approach and understanding is far and away the most important, and the content of the proposal is pretty low on that. This was also obviously for transparency's sake, to allow our applicants to get a sense for how we're looking for what we're looking for, not just what we're looking for. Most of the questions have been regarding price, so I've been referring them to this, saying, well, we can't tell you the price, but keep in mind that as far as evaluation content goes, it's second lowest. We plan on working with them to get them within the budget, whatever that develops to be. Basically, that will be a negotiated process down the line, and we want to make sure that the content of the plan and the deliverable is in line with what we move forward to do.
We've done that in part because of a couple things. One is that some of these things are things we could do in-house, but if we can afford to do it out of house, we'd like to. And so we've asked for people to submit bids with the components broken out, so that we can then go back and say, this is what we can cut in order to achieve this at a cheaper price, or this is what we need to do in full and we can afford to do it in full. So that's where we're at right now on that front. But that's why we didn't give them a price.
Out of curiosity, how do you apply points on contract price? I mean, so let's say that you've got a range of, this one is 300,000, this one's 295,000, this one's 290,000.
So you take the range and divide by the number and, score weight those scores appropriately. So, the lowest price would get the maximum amount of points.
Make a bell curve out of it of sorts. There is a certain amount of subjectivity in the rest of them. This you can be fairly objective with, but the rest of them is going to be kind of, well, what do you think?
Well, if you're comparing apples to apples,
right.
That's sometimes the problem. If you've got, the project approach and understanding, it's so much lighter on this one, who also happens to be so much cheaper.
And that's why we put the price as the lower number of points, is because we want to get the firm that really gets it and is going to produce what we need, and then we'll negotiate the price if we need to.
So, and run over a summary again. Submissions will be due the 13th at 2 p.m. Again, we're based off of ICLEI's 5 basic emission-generating activities, and proposals will be evaluated foremost on their approach and understanding of the scope of work. With that, we're happy to take any questions. That's all for right now.
When the city did the property RFP, they knew how many people had taken the packet. Do you know that here? How many people
I haven't checked today, but it is a large amount.
Oh, yeah? So you expect to have a number of bidders? Yeah.
I think there were in excess of 40.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Some of these were firms I know are not appropriate. An architecture firm who has no business with climate action downloaded it. Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we do know that we've had at least a good handful of ones that we've worked with in the past who are exceptional. And there may be some that we don't know who are exceptional as well. We'll see them when the bids come in, but I feel good that we'll end up with a...
I could talk about my outreach process a little bit. So I did directly invite a handful of firms that I was aware of or had worked with in the past or had some tangential knowledge of. So that stepped us beyond our typical outreach methods, which was just posting on our website. And I also posted on the American Planning Association's RFP website. So that probably got us some more national coverage. I think otherwise we were pretty regional. I focused pretty intently regionally, figuring that if they understood the Oregon regulatory environment, there'd be much less to do. So we got maybe half a dozen firms on my direct invite list, somewhere in that range, and then the rest have come in through the other lead firms.
And I think we've had questions from maybe 7 to 10 from different.
Yeah, most of them have had the same bundle of questions and have been pretty organized with their questions, kind of one after the other of the same group of maybe 4 questions. And I've been able to really boil down the frequently asked questions because of that. So that's really it at this point. So any other questions?
Really quick, if you don't mind, I just noticed a typo in the update about Milwaukee School District. And it's, we don't have Milwaukee School District. So just make sure we reference North Clackamas.
Sure.
And then the other thing I just wanted to ask a question about, and I'm sorry if I was supposed to read the RFP and I didn't see it. No? Okay, good. All right. Because something you mentioned at the very beginning, I'm just curious about whether or not we include anything in terms of corporate responsibility and specifically telling folks that we're interested in firms that
So the answer is not yet. But
Okay.
that's because at the next meeting, I think next week's meeting, study session, we're actually bringing the purchasing code before you guys for the initial discussion. We're actually proposing that we change our purchasing contracting process to actually include those things.
And let's make sure we're talking about the same thing, disadvantaged minority-owned, women-owned, and emerging small business participation. That's what I'm talking about.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, and we are updating the code to include that.
It's COVID firms now, right?
That's all I have.
I think they have disabled veterans.
Yeah.
As part of it. I don't know.
I don't know if it's part of the same list.
Kind of crazy.
I don't know if as many as I wrote down, I'm sorry.
It is an extensive list in the new one that'll be coming, and you will have a chance to see what those are and to make comment before we even start that process, with the hope that by December we'll be bringing you a purchasing code for approval.
And that's, for my purposes, that don't necessarily know, that is separate from our evaluation criteria.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Then
guys.
we
That was
are
great.
adjourned, and we will start the regular session in 21 minutes.